The first article, Self-Efficacy Theory, Implications for Social Facilitation and Social Loafing, highlights the role that self-efficacy plays in performance, both individually and in a group setting. The findings of Experiment 1 were consistent with the previous research in that participants performed better than alone and collective in the high efficacy condition. And in the low efficacy condition, participants performed worse than individual and collective participants. Experiment 2 found that high efficacy expectancies developed when performing an easy task. On the other hand, low efficacy expectancies were developed when performing difficult tasks. These findings did not really surprise me because self-efficacy is something that is quite intrinsic and it can definitely have an impact on performance. The second article, Group versus Individual Decision Making, highlighted the difference between individuals and groups in decision making. Here, the finding was that when individuals made decisions alone before they engaged in a group effort, the group performed better than individual averages. This was interesting because it showed that when people make decisions on their own first, and then they go and make a group decision, process gains occurs. This goes to show that individual characteristics do indeed matter and that they can have a positive effect on group decision making. The group performs better when they have first thought of their own ideas as individuals and then brought those findings, ideas, or decisions into the group. This makes sense because it seems more productive when people do it this way instead of just making a decision as a group before individual members are even able to form their own decisions. So in this manner, group decision making can be quite highly beneficial. The TED Talk, When I Becomes We, was especially interesting because it pointed out that when we form part of a group, even if we don't personally align with the group, we almost have this mind shift where we act in the best interests of the group. And this was interesting because it shows that we can be so easily influenced by a group, even if we don't particularly agree with that group, or even if we don't identify as the other members of the group. I know in the TED Talk, she mentioned an example that people cheat more in games when played as a team than when they are played as an individual. She further explains that this phenomenon is even present when talking about acting violently. Violence is more likely to occur from a group than from an individual. People are more likely to drink really hot sauce in a group setting than they would if they made that decision alone. Groups change the way an individual behaves. And I like that this video highlights the negative side of working in groups and how it can sometimes be counterproductive to work in groups. But I think that overall, these articles and the video proves that this whole blanket notion of group work being better is just not true, and that it needs to be used quite cautiously and in very specific contexts. Okay. So, what success have you had when you have worked in groups? One time I had a group project at work where we were hosting an event for International Education Week. We first identified what our strong suits were, and then we broke up the task into smaller chunks. We then all went off and completed our sections individually, and then we came together to bring all of our individual pieces together. And when we were doing that, we gave each other feedback and we started to tweak our own individual tasks a little bit. And then we were able to collaborate and come up with better ideas. So the event was really successful. And I think that we definitely worked great together as a team. And I think that this is definitely due to us identifying our individual strengths and then splitting up the work according to those strengths first. Why are people so unwilling to admit that they do not exert maximum effort when working in groups? I think that this has a lot to do with social desirability and the idea that people do not want to be viewed in a negative light by others. Individuals fear the negative feedback that they receive from people. And I think that people also have a huge fear of being judged. And also, they seek to view themselves in a positive light. So, if they had to admit that they didn't pull their weight in a group project, then they would also have to sit with the fact that they now have to view themselves in a negative light. And that's, of course, uncomfortable for people. Given the results of studies on social loafing, is the tendency to use teams to get work done a good or a bad idea? I don't know if I could say that working in teams is either a good or a bad idea. I think that there are both positive and negative aspects to working in teams. But when I think about this, although groups and teams are similar, I don't see teams as groups as synonymous. Teams usually have a common goal and they are more interconnected than groups. I would say that a group is more about individuals working together, but it is not always the case that they have common or shared goals. So while I do believe that working in teams could be a good idea, I don't think that working in groups is necessarily always a good idea. I think that it can be beneficial to work together, especially when there is a shared goal and objective, like when working in a team. When there is this sense of interconnectedness, individuals use their strengths to enhance the team, which then obviously contributes to reaching their shared goals. And I feel like this is highly dependent on the context as well. I don't think that it should be either or. And I think that the focus should instead be on structuring the team in such a way that it is headed for success. It would be beneficial for teams to seek ways to mitigate social loafing so that everybody pulls their weight. And this can be done by letting individual members go off on their own and come up with their own ideas or their solutions first, and then coming together to come up with even better ideas as a team, much like the article on group versus individual decision making. How do you take a group with one weak member and reach a successful outcome? I think one of the best approaches would be to identify individual strengths in the group. I would then also identify any weaknesses within the group so that there is sort of an open dialogue about strengths and weaknesses. And I think that in this way, there's less social pressure on that individual, because then everybody is talking about their strengths and weaknesses. Everybody is sharing. And then I would then assign roles based on those individual strengths so that each person is able to utilize their skills and not feel as if they are not contributing to the success of the group. So, yeah, thank you.